Hey, come through, just you or your crew. I just want to tell you about some news you could use with the All Black Matters podcast. Hey. Okay, guys, so before I get into this episode, I got to tell you guys about this amazing app that I found for podcasters. If you are interested in podcasting, never had a podcast before, know nothing about podcasting, I'm telling you, you want to download this app. It's called the Anchor app. Now, the Anchor app has literally everything you could ever need to build your podcast for absolutely $0. I am not joking. It's literally what I use to record my podcast every week. If you are at all interested in getting into the game, you want resources, you want to be able to record with friends, you want to be able to have all the things that you need basically as a starter kit, you want to download this app. Just go to anchor.fm and get started. Guys, you're going to thank me later, I'm telling you. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of the All Black Matters podcast. I'm your host, Rifka, and today I got a good one for you guys. It's going to be a little bit different than what we usually kind of do, but I'm going to get a little bit personal this episode, give you guys a little bit of a tea on my life. Let me see how this goes. This week I want to talk about religion, specifically why I left the church. I used to be, many people probably don't know this, but I used to be really an active member of a church body for like quite some time, a few years, like 5-6 years, in my past life, I like to say. And I just want to talk about why I'm no longer a part of that church. I want to talk about why, what changed, how my mindset is, how things have just kind of evolved from a, let's say, a religious to a faith-based perspective for me, and just like what that's all about. So if you're interested in hearing more about that, stay tuned. Okay, so this is one of them ones where it's like, where do I even start, bro? Like, there's just so much to unpack, but also like not like, I don't know. I feel like because I feel like it's been a lifetime ago now also, because like I haven't been a part of the church that I'm speaking about in question for about close to 5 years now, bro. Like, it's been a while. So for me, it's definitely, it's been close to 5 years, because I'm thinking about when I joined and I was 16, I'm 26 now. So it's been about 5 years that I've not been a part of that church, and I was a part of the church for 5 years. So yeah. Anyways, just jumping straight into it, just so you guys can have kind of a backstory on me and like, I guess, my faith journey or religion journey or whatever you want to call it. And I will distinguish between the two. I'm just saying that because I think my journey I'll explain it a little bit. So as far as upbringing, my parents were very much practicing Christians. They were very much into the Bible, into, just what Christianity stands for, and actively took me to church, as a child. I would say specifically more my grandmother. And then my mother became a big part of the church. She was a leader in the church when I was younger. And among a lot of other things, that was something that I found to be like, was a big, big deal for my family. Was very much like quoting scriptures, lived your life this way. It was just a part of our like pretty much my makeup, I feel like, that I didn't have a choice at the time, because obviously I was a child, and what can I say? I just have to go. So fast forwarding to, I would say, like my preteen years, my mother had by this time been a part of a church for, I would say, close to 5 or 6 years, probably 7. And she probably even more than that, to be honest. I actually don't know the exact time. I just know it was a long ass time for me. And I know that at that time she left the church, and that had a lot to do with like her relationship with the leadership there, and I guess disagreements, etc. At the time, child, I'm like 12, so I don't know what the hell is going on. I did experience a lot of like things that I felt like weren't right in that church, but obviously at this point I was a child, so I didn't have a say as to like whether or not I'm going to stay in the church, whether I'm not going to go. So, or like whatever was going on, how to deal with it, how to address it. So again, when my mom left, I obviously subsequently left with her as well. Now, as far as what I understood about what it meant to be a Christian, or like have faith, or like just a higher power, anything that was like outside of the realm of like the natural, I would say I was very informed from my family's perspective, like as far as like what they told me. They would often tell me to read my Bible and things like that. And I had faith. I knew that there was a God. Like I had faith enough to know that. But I didn't understand what it was to be religious, which is what I believe my family is and was. In the sense that like they practice certain things in a way that was more, I believe, more performative. And I think religion is that kind of like you're doing things to show that you are a part of this faith, or you have this affinity, or you have this belief, etc. And so I was doing those things because, again, my family did it, but I didn't really understand the significance of them at the point. You know what I'm saying? Like, so at like, let's say 12, 13, when my mother left the church, I didn't really understand, like, okay, like we're doing all these things and you're telling me I'm supposed to do that because that's what God wants me to do. But like, you're telling me that, and I don't know. And I'm also seeing at this point, I'd seen so much things that was contradictory to what people said I was supposed to do in the church that I was like, what is going on here? So yeah, just to give you kind of like a scope of that. So I guess you can say if I'm being, I'm kind of like explaining my introduction to Christianity, it wasn't very informative. Like I think I just had to do what I was told, and I wasn't explained too much as to like what it was in depth. Not until I left the church, funny enough. So I left the church with my mother. At the time, I was like 13 or whatever, or 12, like I said. And I had no like interest in being a part of a church anymore at that point. I was young, but like I was just like, yo, like I'm in high school now, like I'm living my life, like nobody can tell me nothing, like whatever. And I just didn't have an interest based off of what I was exposed to as a child in being a part of a church, right? Obviously, at this point, it wasn't really my decision because, again, like, I'm not the one that initiated it. But again, I had that attitude, like, I don't really know, like, people in the church are weird, like, I don't know, like, I also felt, like, very much shamed by people because it was, like, any little thing I did was a problem, et cetera, et cetera. So I just was like, I'm over it. At this time, though, I had friends. I'd made friends in the church, and I was still in communication with them. So fast forward to a couple years later, at 16, I went through a lot at that age, and I ended up actually starting to go to church again. Now, I know the story sounds crazy. I know it's like, girl, you not there, but then you there. What's going on, child? Like, what's happening? Why are you so all over the place? There's great reasons for that, guys. So at the time that I was 16, I was pretty much abandoned by my mother, and I was living with her at the time. And so she kind of like left and never came back for a little while. I know I'm laughing. That's probably not funny, right? That's not funny. Anyways, it's been years, y'all. So I'm not in the same place about it anymore. But yeah, she left for a little bit, and it kind of like woke me up a bit in a sense. I think it changed a lot of things mentally for me, like emotionally for me. I saw things a lot differently at the time. It also wasn't the first time she left me. So it was kind of like, it was like one of those, like, you had those, like, I don't want to say midlife crisis, or like, what do you call that? Like a point in time when something kind of like awakens in you and you kind of start to see the world a little bit differently. That was my moment, right? At 16, when I'm like, okay, so now I have to actually get into adult mode because I can't really depend on the people that I thought I could depend on. So, those feelings, among other things, kind of had me, I always had faith, or I always had an idea of who God was. At that time was when I turned to that. So that's why it makes sense. Like at the time I was like, you know what? I keep hearing about this God, and I know that I believe that there's a God. I know that there's, a lot of stuff that happened previously with church people and stuff, and I didn't like that. But let me try and like get in tune with that again. Around this time, I had a friend who was, starting to go to a new church, and she was like, you should come out with me. Like, let's go together, et cetera, et cetera. I wasn't super excited about the idea. Ended up going, fast forward, ended up joining that church. I don't know if I'm going too fast or not, but I'm trying to give you guys just the highlight reels of what happened. That church that I ended up joining, that my friend introduced me to, I ended up being a part of that church for the next 5 years, which is, the span that I'm talking about, that I ended up leaving after that time. So yeah, that that time of my life was very, very much different. I think that the reason why I got into going to church again and just like staying a part of that church was probably, it was more emotions, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was more like I was looking for something that would fill a hole that was, you know, a void that I had in my life at the time. And I didn't know much about how faith or Christianity was. I think I was exposed to religion a lot as a child, and like performative behavior and like trying to earn love or trying to earn acceptance or trying to earn kind of like a right to something. And I had that idea when I joined that church. I also feel like the church was very toxic in a lot of ways. It taught me a lot, so I benefited from it, but it was very toxic when I joined. So as a 16-year-old, you know, I joined that church and I was very, very quickly, you know, accepted into leadership or promoted into leadership. And it wasn't something that I was looking for or something that I sought out. But, you know, it was almost like, okay, yeah, you need to be working for the Lord. And like you end up being in leadership. If you ever been to a Pentecostal church, you kind of understand where I'm going with this, you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of stuff that happens, I feel like, that are highlight reels, and like the process is very fast when you know, in certain denominations, at least in my experience. And I think that that's something that happened in that environment. One thing I will say that I came away from that experience better from, in terms of like, you know, positive messages, etc. I was taught about what it meant to really have a relationship with Christ, right? Or really have a relationship with God. At that time, prior to that, I had only been taught about performative behaviors, like what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to act, et cetera, et cetera. And I didn't really understand what it was to like really talk to God like that's my homie. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like really have a relationship where I'm going directly to the source that I was taught about for all these years, but I didn't understand that I had that access, right? So as far as like positive messaging, there was a reason why I stayed for 5 years. There was a reason why I feel like I benefited from being a part of that environment, and even being, I feel like, almost forced into leadership very, very quickly. And at that young, tender age, like, I think that it did benefit me in certain ways, even though it wasn't really the way that I don't think that that's the way it should have happened if I'm looking back on it. But again, I do think it taught me a lot. As far as the reasons why I think that church was extremely toxic, I just think that the leadership in the church it became very, in my opinion, corrupt very fast. If we're just going to fast forward to the end, I ended up getting jumped in that church physically. Yes, jumped, if you understand what that means. Lots of people put physical hands on me and physically assaulted me in that church. And that is the reason why I ended up leaving that church. So if you want to talk about if there's toxic, I think that takes the cake as far as toxicity. How do you say that word, child? As far as being toxic goes, I feel like that one would kind of be the bar set as to why you should leave an environment. Anytime you're in an environment, let me just say, where you're physically being hurt, emotionally hurt, spiritually hurt even, which all of those things happened for me in my experience in that church, which is also why I left. You should leave. Like, I don't care what anyone says. People might try to make excuses and say, hey, but, you know, we've done this for you, or this is a situation where you've benefited in this way. Listen, sis, that's like when your boyfriend, if you had a boyfriend that was abusive, he would always say, but I love you. I do it because I love you. No, babe, listen. Anytime you're in a situation, this is barring being in church, any kind of situation that you're in where you feel like you're being compromised in some kind of way, and it's just not making you feel good, you should exit. 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 You should seek counsel outside of that environment and exit. You know, do it gracefully. Do it however you know it's the safest for you, but exit. I just want to stress that because I'm partially telling this story because I feel like somebody may need to hear it. Somebody may be going through something similar. I've never spoken about it because I just felt like I've spoken about it to people that I'm really close to and like people that know the people that I'm talking about and stuff. Some of them anyway, because I'm not really into like the whole like putting people out there. But at the same time, I feel like people can benefit from this. And I think that I've grown tremendously as a result of going through stuff like this. You know what I'm saying? So that's really why I wanted to tell my story. So again, jumping back into it, I think it's, like I said, worth mentioning that I at that time that I was a part of that church, there was both good things and bad things that happened. And ultimately, it was a toxic environment, and it was something that I could not deal with anymore. I felt like I was, it sounds like I'm exaggerating, but I literally felt like I was going crazy in that church. Like, I felt like everything that I thought about myself was being kind of picked apart and made to believe like I was someone who I wasn't. And I was just an awful person. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I think that that's why I think previously I mentioned about religion versus having a relationship with Christ, you know what I'm saying? Or having a relationship with God. I am a Christian still, so I do have a relationship, I feel like, with Christ, and I do, you know, communicate with my creator. And I feel like all those things are important. I would consider myself more spiritual now as opposed to religious. I do obviously have faith, and those things go hand in hand. And I'll kind of explain the latter in a second. But when I speak about religion, I'm speaking about, again, performative action, things that you feel like you have to do and earn kind of like the grace that God gives, you know what I mean? If you do believe that there is a God. And I think that while I was being taught, as I said previously, that wasn't what I had to do, I was also given conflicting messages. In like, the pastor or the people in the church, the leaders, would expect me, myself, and other people, not just me, to be a certain kind of way because of what we're a part of, you know what I'm saying? And I hope this is clear, but pretty much there was a whole lot of like teenagers as part of leadership in that church. And it was a small church, but pretty much the whole leadership was teenagers. And if you can imagine, teenagers are still growing, we're still learning. We were all pretty much also really new to being like practicing Christians or like being leaders in churches, because there's also differences in the way, you know, things happen when you're a leader and what you have to go through, and, you know, being a face, kind of like representing your church, and all of these things were very new to a lot of us. And I think that the way that we were handled and treated, especially when it wasn't something that we kind of like pushed ourselves into, if that makes sense, it was really, really, really not, I feel like, Christian, like in favor of being a Christian, or how would you say it? Kind of like, it didn't show Christianity in the way we were treated. We were very much condemned and like, you know, exposed, for lack of a better word, and constantly like berated and just treated like if we were, I don't know, on trial all the time. Like, I felt like my life in that church I was constantly on trial all the time for everything that I ever thought, things that I didn't even think, things that I didn't even do. Like, it was just always like this, like, questioning or this reckoning that I had to experience. And I just don't think that's to me, that's extremely toxic in any church environment or any environment. You shouldn't feel like everything that you ever do is always on trial, especially if we're preaching messages that God is love and faith and grace and all these things. I think the people that were leading the church were very much imperfect people, as we all are. And that definitely spilled out into the way that they led, and which ultimately led to me having to say goodbye. Now, this was one of the biggest, like, I think the hardest decisions I had to make. And I say that because these people I love, you know, I still felt like I was connected to them, even though I felt like what they were doing was toxic and hurt me. You know what I'm saying? I just didn't know how to reconcile the two. And going back into now having relationship and having faith and, you know, understanding Christianity from a perspective of, you know, on that side of things, I had to learn that kind of like on my own. Because as I said, while I was being taught one thing, I was being shown something else. So it almost took me stepping away from the church to really develop a relationship with God on my own. You know what I mean? So I think that's important to also note, because it's like a lot of the times, you know, I feel like Christians tell you that you have to be a part of a church body, which I do think is important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not out here telling everybody, listen, leave your church, don't be a part of a church. No, that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that there's a difference. You know what I'm saying? I just want to highlight that there's a difference between being a part of a church and understanding the relationship that you have with your creator, your maker, is very personal. And a lot of people won't understand that because they're not meant to understand it. You know what I'm saying? So, and I think sometimes that can be conflated with a lot of messages that we see in the church, a lot of things that they try to kind of influence us to do isn't always, I feel like, as genuine as as it could be, because again, we're all flawed humans. So I'm not saying this to make excuses for any church members or any people that I was associated with, because if you listen, these people, I have made police reports. I'm not like, no, you don't put your hands on somebody. It's not okay. And no, especially as a man. So no, I'm not saying that those things are good. And I know I'm kind of like glossing over it. It's just, it's been so long that it's kind of like, it is a big deal to me, but it's also like, the bigger thing for me was that I got out of that situation and I learned from it. You know what I'm saying? So, and I'm saying this and I'm telling this story again for anyone else who might be in a similar situation that feels like, I don't feel like I'm being treated right in this environment and I don't really know what to do about it. I would say to you to try and find someone outside of that environment to confide in or to help you, because I didn't do that. And I kind of like bottled it up and kind of was like, okay, you know what, God, if this is a sign, if you telling me that I need to leave the church, you should let me know. And then I ended up getting assaulted in the church, child. And it was like, oh, that's your sign kind of thing. At least that's how I took it. I don't know if that's what really happened, but that's how I took it. Like, okay, this is happening and this is your sign. It probably was signs before that, but I didn't really like see them until it was that drastic. So I just want to say, like, you know, it's important to understand the distinction between relationship and religion, and not to fall into the trap of, if you are someone who's faith-based and do identify as being a Christian, to understand that there's a difference there. And also not to place all of your hope and, like, I guess, assessment of whatever form of faith that you practice in the leaders that are practicing those faiths. Like, we've seen time and time again, leaders mess up, leaders screw up, they fall short, they do things they ain't really supposed to be doing, child. Like, let's just keep it a buck. They do stuff they're not supposed to be doing. The other day I just saw, it was last month, that a pastor and a self-proclaimed prophet killed his wife. You know what I'm saying? And just was like, yeah, like, I'm gonna just kill her. He said it the day before, killed her the next day. And he felt like that's something that he had to do. Obviously, this man was demented, like, hello. But there's so many people that are like that. And there's more people that are like that than you think. So sometimes I think for me, what I learned in that instance, being a part of that church, I was very naive. I thought that I could trust the leadership in that church, which you should be able to. Let me be very clear. You should be able to trust your leadership if you are part of any church body, which is, again, why I'm not a part of a church body right now. And I don't really see that as like a end goal kind of thing for me, because it's like, ciao. But if you are part of a church body, you should be able to trust them. In my environment, in my experience, I felt like I couldn't trust my church body. I couldn't confide in them about anything. I couldn't look to them for support, because they were the ones that were, for lack of a better term, attacking me. Again, this is just to kind of like, any young person, child, anybody who is, you know, coming up in the faith, or just young in a church environment, or in any environment like that. Just see the signs and listen to yourself. People will try to make you feel like if you're crazy, or no, you know, you're just trying to be rebellious, or whatever the case may be. No, child. If you have an intuition, go with your gut, and yeah, just try and get out of that situation as safely as possible. And look for help. Look for someone to kind of guide you if you don't feel like you can do it on your own. Look for support. You know, if you are someone who has faith, you would, you know, potentially believe that God will get you out of the situation. So I would say, or help you to navigate the situation. So I would say, rely on that, you know, rely on your source, and also understand that it doesn't mean that you are not a good Christian, or you're not a good faith, you know, you're not a faithful person because you're leaving this situation. Because I had to deal with those feelings after leaving the situation. Was like, damn, like, does that mean I'm not a Christian now? Like, does that mean that I don't love God? Like, does that mean all of these things? But yeah, I would say just try to lean on your intuition, lean on the fact that God has given you enough in yourself that you don't need to look externally for everything. And that's probably one of the biggest things I will say. this situation taught me, this entire ordeal, the fact that I was a part of a toxic environment, the fact that I went in kind of looking for solace, looking for community, and wasn't really given that in a really genuine way, and had to leave feeling even more abandoned than I came in, taught me not to look externally for something that God has already put inside of me. Like, everything I need for life and happiness is literally a scripture, is God has already placed it in me. So it's like, I have to trust in that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have to trust in that no matter what it looks like, no matter what the situation or the circumstances may seem on the outside, it is what it is. If that makes sense, like, it doesn't change. It doesn't change. The fact that that is the truth it's not wavering. You know what I'm saying? So even though it might feel like, you're lonely or you don't understand what to do next, again, I believe from where I stand in my faith that I already have those things, those qualities, whatever I need, like whether that be strength, whether that be, just resilience, whatever it is, that's already in me. It's just going to take a situation potentially to bring it out of me. And in my opinion, prayer, So, and I've seen that, like, ever since I left that toxic environment, I've flourished. I've been able to do so much. I've been so much freer as a human being. Like, I've been able to be myself in a way that I never thought I could. And that's just like in so many different ways, in so many different ways. I just feel a lot lighter. I don't feel like I'm burdened down with, worrying about what people are going to think and how people are going to perceive me and all the things that I was so cautious about. And even how I said stuff, like, I would get anxiety attacks, y'all. Like, it was really, really bad when I was in that environment. And I felt like everything I was doing was under a microscope and I could never do anything right. And especially that I was so young. That's something that I also really wanted to highlight. Like, I was so young when I started out in that church and was in leadership, introduced to leadership at such a young age. So all of the pressures of being a leader in general was so new to me. And then on top of that, I was very new to, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, being actively that much into any kind of, like, new faith or whatever. And so all of it was just a lot, you know what I'm saying? And I think that it definitely made me the person that I am today. And so I would never say, again, I don't understand to this day, I don't understand why I had to go through that. You know what I'm saying? As far as, like, what happened to me, I don't think it was my fault. And so I don't understand why it had to happen in the way that it did. But what I will say is that from that situation, I have become the person that I am today. And I would never trade that, bro. Confident, beautiful, smart. I'm someone who's ambitious. I do whatever I want to do, low key. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, all of these things are because of that environment and that experience, you know what I'm saying? All of the experiences that I had while I was there, and also what it was like having to make the choice, very difficult choice, to leave. And so, again, I just want to say to anyone else that might be going through anything similar, like, whether that be church, it could be something else, it could be whatever it is, just know that, like, you're going to be able to get through it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just want to give words of encouragement in that sense. I know it's sounding like real preachy, child, and that is not my tease, but I'm just saying, I know what I felt like when I was going through that situation. I felt very much by myself. I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know who would be on my side, for lack of a better term, but, like, I didn't feel like anybody was there for me. I didn't feel like I had the support of people that I thought would, kind of, like, stand up for the truth and stand up for what really happened. And I got a lot of, like, turnbacks, you know what I'm saying? And that brings me to why I'm no longer a part of a church now. I think for me, understanding that people are flawed in this way, and understanding that as much as we can be a part of let's say a religion or a part of a faith or a part of a community, people in that community will fall short. They will do something that's not nice. They'll do something that you don't necessarily like, etc. And for me personally, I've seen a lot. Like I said before, I've been in church for a very long time. So I've seen a lot to say, I don't really know. Like, I don't really know about y'all. You know what I'm saying? And that's not to say that that's not to say that I'm against being a part of a church, because I think that it's a beautiful thing. Once you get an environment of people that, as a collective, support and uplift one another and also have one, like, are in one mind and one vision, it's a very beautiful thing. But it also can be very, very toxic. You know what I'm saying? If people have conflated understandings of things and don't really have the right, or I don't want to say the right because, child, but have the same vision or have the same understanding or agenda. So it's just very, very hard to find that these days, and hard to find a community, a body of people that, egos aside, personal issues aside, they're going to be focused on making sure that everybody in this environment is taken care of and is protected, but also we all have the same vision, if that makes sense. So yeah, again, that's why I left the church. In I guess a short, long story, that is why I am no longer a part of any church. I know people that know me, knew me then, would say like, girl, you so different than when you was, when you were a part of the church, etc. But I just learned a lot. I grew a lot. I still do have faith. I am not religious. I don't consider myself religious. I don't want to be religious. I have no intentions of that. And yeah, like, I think I'm a better person now. I've grown up to be, more resilient, have an even deeper relationship with God, and all of those things that came out of that situation. So that is my story. And again, this is just for anyone who has gone through something similar. Let me know, guys. You can reach out to me and, we can have little combos about it, whatever, you know what I'm saying? I shared it because I want to kind of like be able to be that beacon for people that might be in that situation and don't know how to deal with it. Or even if you had a similar situation, we could just have that conversation. So let me know. You guys already know, All Black Matters Podcast on Instagram and All Black Matters Podcast at gmail.com. Hit me up. Let me know what's going on, And yeah, that's pretty much the pod today. I just kind of wanted to take a moment to share that. I actually wanted to go into depth and kind of like have like a panel discussion. I might do that later on. But yeah, I kind of wanted to just broach the subject so that we got our feet wet, so to speak. So yeah, hopefully you guys gain something from this from this information, child, from this episode. And yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it. I will talk to you guys again in the next 2 weeks. That's when the next pod comes out. Tell your friend, tell a friend, and tell a friend. Tune in, join the party, and have a great rest of the week, guys.